I want to turn our attention to now the realities of COVID and a developing story that California, the first state to tell residents to stay at home to fight the coronavirus pandemic, may be about to do it all over again. Governor Gavin Newsom warning residents in just the last hour that the state would impose a new shelter-at-home order if hospitals start running out of ICU capacity, which, of course, spells trouble for businesses, especially the restaurant industry. Joining us now from the Lucques Group, co-founder Caroline Styne. She is also an independent restaurant coalition advisory board member. You've set up restaurant after restaurant in the LA area. You have had such success, and you yourself a sommelier and wine chooser. But it's interesting the way you've diversified your company, because you not only do indoor and outdoor dining, but you also have baking goods that you can get at home. But just tell us the reality of what it's like on the ground for you and your business.
I have to tell you, very, very rough in Los Angeles right now. We've going back to March, we've been, just struggling to survive and struggling to keep people employed. And, we hit roadblock after roadblock, and this latest one has been pretty devastating, I have to say.
And so, Caroline, with regards to, I guess, the alternatives that restaurants have with regards to whether they're doing indoor dining or whether they shift to something like takeout or even catering, can you give us a sense here of how the economics of maybe those alternatives don't necessarily live up, I guess, to the previous business model, which is indoor dining?
Oh, yeah. I mean, restaurants are built for people to be gathering en masse and doing volume. That's the only way that a restaurant actually makes any money. We are an industry that operates on a very, very thin profit margin. So, obviously we've all pivoted to doing takeout, and takeout really makes up for maybe 10% at the most of a restaurant's normal operating income. We've also pivoted in LA to purely outdoor dining. And even then, we were lucky at our restaurant that we actually have, a bit of real estate. So we were able to turn our parking lot into a patio, but we still were only operating at 60% of our normal revenues. And when many of your fixed costs are just what they are, that really doesn't cut it. And so I know in LA, we've all been operating really losing money, trying to lose as little as we possibly can just to tread water and get through this and keep people employed.
There's been a lot of criticism about Garcetti and Newsom, some of the hypocrisy and the lack of leadership and guidance. What do you need to see from your mayor and your governor?
It's so hard. We all want this COVID virus to be gone. We all want to get back to our normal lives. We want to be able to get back to having people dining indoors again. I know that they are faced with a challenge that I don't personally face, which is making decisions for millions of people. We just would love to be able to, see the science of it all and understand the science of it all, to know what we're doing is actually correct. When we're seating people outside 8 feet apart, that's what we've learned is supposed to be safe. Then we want to see evidence that isn't really working. But on the whole, what we need is relief. Restaurants across the country need relief, financial relief, to get us through this. We've all been forced to close our doors or go down to very minimal revenues for the greater good of the community. And we need to be made whole from that, just really so that we can survive this.
You have Lucques, of course, you have AOC, you have Tavern Restaurant and the Larder. You're not having to make decisions for millions of people, Karen, but you are having to make decisions on the livelihoods of tens of people, hundreds maybe even, that depend on you in some way through the supply chain. How is it being a manager of a business right now, and how are you hoping that you can weather this storm just to get the next hopeful round of PPP or some sort of stimulus?
Yeah, it's torturous. I've had to lay people off count over and over. The first time in March was painful. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know what we were facing ahead, and people didn't know if they were losing their jobs for good. And we've been able to bring some people back on, and they've gone back off. And it's heartbreaking to see people have to go back into a situation where they really don't know if they're going to be able to pay their rent or put food on the table. It's torture.
Yeah. What about, I guess, the future of dining in general? I mean, under the presumption that we do get a vaccine and COVID is somehow under control in a year's time, do you have a general sense here that the general capacity that we had pre-COVID with regards to dining, that we will return to that capacity in some form or another, even if it is with maybe potentially different players in there?
Yes, I think we'll get back there slowly. I think the recovery is going to be long. I do think eventually we will all get back to where we were, especially if everybody gets this vaccine and we all participate in getting our country through this. But I think it's going to be a very long recovery. We're not going to snap right back. We're not going to get right back to our full capacities. And we're going to have to be very, very careful about how we do it. And that probably means that not everybody will be back employed in their old positions. We're all learning how to operate differently. And I think people's expectations of what they're going to be getting in terms of service and the experience in a restaurant might change as well based on purely on the economics of it.
We only have a minute left. You mentioned you need help. Do you need more PPP loans? Do you need loan forgiveness?
We need more than PPP loans. PPP loans are just covering a fraction of what we need to cover, and they only cover us for a very short period of time. They were an 8-week Band-Aid to an 18-month problem. What we need is the Restaurants Act, which is a $120 billion grant fund for restaurants that covers not just rent and utilities and labor for a short period of time. It would cover that for an extended period of time, as well as supplies, operating expenses, PPE, which is incredibly expensive, and all these modifications that we've made.